Hi there. Welcome back to Let's Talk Adoption. I'm Heather. Kim's here with me today, and we are so glad you're here with us. We hope that you hit subscribe and don't miss an episode because today we're talking about something that, it might seem like a real simple question, but it actually is an important one. And that is, can you say no in adoption?
And ironically, the answer is yes. But
But
let's unpack it.
right, right. It's not always, what what people think it is. Not always for the reasons, maybe not the questions, but there are definitely some healthy no's in adoption, and there are also some no's that can cause real hurt.
Right. So, a few categories of instances that might leave you wondering, can we say no? Can adoptive families say no? Can expectant mothers say no or change their minds? And can agencies say no to assisting a client? And can you say no to open adoption?
And I think when we're talking about these no's, when is it wise and advised? And when is it maybe based on fear, or maybe when is it selfish? Maybe even
Mhm.
harmful.
Yeah, so let's get into it. And let's start at adoptive parents.
Okay.
I think probably most of our listeners are adoptive parents,
Mm-hmm.
but if you are not, you are also welcome here at the Let's Talk Adoption podcast. And, but can adoptive parents say no to an adoption situation?
And I think what we're going to really focus on as this question is for a domestic adoption.
Right.
Because if you're adopting a waiting child internationally, those are different questions. We're talking more about families waiting, probably primarily for a newborn, and can they say no to an adoption situation? I think the answer for this is really about the context. You know, there may be very valid reasons that a family may be chosen and not move forward. Maybe there's medical needs that are beyond what a family feels equipped, emotionally or financially or physically, um, beyond what they feel equipped to parent. Maybe the adoption opportunity has developed so that there is significant legal risk. It may not even happen, and that risk may be outside of what they are comfortable moving forward to, or outside of what they agreed upon. And maybe the requests of the birth parents in regards for openness are just more than they feel capable of honoring. I mean, those are kind of what we see first come up when this question of can we say no might happen.
I think that's a really good question to ask any adoption professional before you agree to partner with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
When are we committed? When are we able to say no? What's the expectation? What's your expectation of us? What's the birth mother's expectation? How are we framed to her, if at all, when we're first told about her? And I think those are all things to really thoughtfully consider. And one more, Heather, is if there's new information that pops up, as things sometimes do with the health of a baby,
Hmm.
perhaps a child is born with a severe special need that a family who was matched with that adoption and with that child and birth mom, perhaps they're just not able to be the right family for that child now that these special needs have either
Right.
developed or come to light.
Hmm.
And that I would say is a very valid reason to consider saying no. And the family could say yes, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
that's definitely a real scenario that sometimes families may find themselves in. Not often, but that does
Hmm.
happen sometimes.
Hmm. And that's really when, I mean, that particular instance, you know, being honest about what is more than we can handle, because, you know, the reverse of that happens too. You know, we get stories from birth parents who are choosing adoption because there was a diagnosis that was more than they could handle. And, you know, there can be a lot of guilt on those types of no's too. But, you know, I want to kind of shift into a little bit of a hard truth here. And that is, if adoptive parents have already said, hey, we're open to these situations, and maybe that is the race of the baby, maybe that is um, the any substance exposure in utero, you know, anything like that, that they've already said they're open to certain, you know, to these situations, these preferences, these characteristics, and they're chosen based on those, saying no for what amounts to one of those reasons, you know, that then we're starting to look at a no in a different light. You know, it may appear to be a shallow reason, a selfish reason. And those are the things that can be hurtful. And I
Mm-hmm.
know, you know, we both have stories we could tell about this, and certainly we're all human and we all make the best decision we can. But I remember many years ago, I hadn't worked in adoption long, maybe a year or two, and uh, I had called a family about a baby who had just been born. And, you know, usually when you call families in those situations, they're excited, you know, and this family was not particularly excited. And, you know, they said, well, let us talk and get back to you. And they talked and called me back. And they said, you know, this is really hard for us because our daughter is starting kindergarten tomorrow. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. And I mean, I totally get that. But also, you know, if mom was pregnant and her water broke 3 weeks early, you're going to have a baby. You know, this isn't something you put off. And they said no because they didn't want to miss their daughter's first day of kindergarten. And, you know, again, I'm not trying to judge anyone's no here, but that was a hard one to, you know, then go back to the birth mom and try to explain. Um, Timing when you're working with adoptions of newborn adoptions, timing, you know, adoptive families need to come into this knowing that that's one of the things they can't control is the timing. And when you're waiting to be chosen, you know, that is that's tough.
Absolutely. And I remember a family said no to a match. The birth mom wasn't due right away, but they said no to a match because they looked at their calendar and realized their sister's wedding
Hmm.
was a big deal and they were a
Right,
big part of the wedding.
right,
And the due date just didn't fit the schedule of their sister's wedding. So they said no to that birth mom and baby.
right. And
And
these are the no's that, you know, don't fit into newborn domestic adoption well.
right,
You know, I remember another family I worked with years ago, and they were chosen. They hadn't been waiting very long, and they were chosen, and the wife was thrilled, and the husband called back and said, "No, we're not going to do this." And I remember just being perplexed. And the coordinator told me this, and I'm like, "Well, let's get him on the phone. Let's ask a little more." And so we called him because she didn't really get a clear reason of why, especially when the wife was so excited. And we got them back on the phone. And honestly, the husband got scared. He got
mm,
scared after being chosen of, and it wasn't a last minute. It had, you know, I think she had about 6 or 8 weeks left to go in her pregnancy. But it was that you know, sometimes you build up on something, and then when it happens, you kind of have this freak out moment, and that's where he was. and we talked through it. I remember I probably talked to that man for an hour that afternoon, not trying to convince him, but just listening and letting him process. And we get to the end of this conversation and he says, "We are a yes. I am so sorry." But he realized he had just freaked out. And so, that's another reason sometimes those no's pop up is they they just get scared after being chosen of what's the next step. And it just suddenly felt overwhelming.
Heather, so now a thing you said a moment ago and the thing you said just now, or what you've been illustrating, I have a follow-up question to that I think people want to know.
Okay.
A moment ago, you said you had to go back to the birth mom
Hmm.
and try to explain to her how the family said no. And in this case, you were diligent. You were like not going to let it go. You're like, why? And how can we overcome this? And you spent an hour pouring into and listening to, and
Right.
I'm sure letting the Holy Spirit drive you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Driving that conversation,
Hmm.
right? As we often do.
Hmm.
And then he said yes. But there was a diligence there that was something was driving you. And please tell us why it is hard for a birth mom to choose a family and then be told no. Like, what's the impact to her? Why can't she just pick another family?
And that's a great question. And that often comes from a place of not understanding the um, the fact that women put thought and care into a choice of a family. They're choosing parents for their child. They're essentially choosing what their child's life is going to be like. And they look through some families, they decide this is the one. And I'll tell you what, Kim, that is a tough call to call back. And, and it's tough for a couple reasons. When the family says no for reasons that I'm sorry are not anything that that is really understandable. I mean, I'm just
Like
gonna put it out there.
not relevant to their
Yeah,
ability to parent that child.
right.
It's a frivolous
That's
reason. Time
it.
frame,
It is.
appearance, tone of the birth mom's voice. These are all real things.
They are. I mean, there's a story we know about a family who turned down because they didn't like what the birth mother's nose looked like. You know, these are frivolous. That's a great way to say it. I mean, when families come into adoption, I think that's one of the things they naturally learn pretty quickly is that the the things they have control over, they end here. And then everything else they don't have control over. And certainly these decisions, absolutely, they have control. But adoption is emotional for families and for birth parents. And so to go back to a birth parent and explain um, as best you can and asking her to choose again, she can't. I mean, anyone would think, there's something about me that they didn't like, or my child wasn't good enough for them. And that can be difficult. But I like that we're talking about this because for parents who are in the process or thinking about adoption, it's good to know that you know it's not waiting till the one that feels right. You know what? You're waiting for the one who chooses you. That
Hmm.
really is what it is because again, understanding that adoption is emotional, understanding that fear is normal, understanding that this is something you've never done before. It very likely may not feel right until you're on the other side of it. It's going to feel new. It's going to feel uncomfortable. There's going to be some unknowns regardless of the situation. But these are real people involved. There's a real woman carrying a baby. There's a real baby. This is a real lifelong decision. This is not ordering something on Amazon. It's not online shopping. It is it's serious.
Hmm. It's, a lot of times adoptive parents, when I start talking with them, maybe through a scheduled phone call, video
Mhm,
call, they'll tell me that they've talked with some adoption professionals and it felt transactional.
mhm, mhm.
And yes, there are some basic steps that are check boxes,
Sure.
to-dos, but the overall experience is not transactional at all. It
No,
shouldn't be.
no.
But going back to what I said earlier, it's just so important to understand and ask an adoption professional in advance, how does the match process come about?
Mhm,
When are we committed? At what point would it be wrong for us to say no in your eyes? Ask those questions because with some agencies, you might be asked to look at 10 cases a month and choose if you want to be shown to her.
mhm.
Okay, there are pros and cons to that.
You
There's no right or
bet.
wrong model.
Right.
There's no right or wrong model, but there are pros and cons to that as well. But in an agency model where the birth mom chooses the family based on preference, based on profiles that are presented to her, based
Mhm.
on the fact that these families established their adoption preferences, they said,
Right.
yes, we will say yes when a birth mom within this criteria chooses us. All you have to do then is wait to be chosen, right?
Right.
So then why would you say no? And I think that rejection is very poignant for women who have experienced this in adoption and with the world at large being a huge no for women in this position. No, you shouldn't
Mhm,
choose this. No, you shouldn't have this baby. No, you're not good enough to be a mom. Everything in the world is signaling no to her. We don't want there to be one more no when she has already opened her heart to adoption and you, and she's on the track to choosing a future for her child that she feels at peace with,
mhm.
only to have something derail her that could have been prevented.
Right.
So understand how it's framed
Yeah.
and then make your decisions accordingly. And we know that if you're new to adoption, some of the things that we're saying in this concept can feel a little abrasive against your heart right now,
Mhm,
but it's good. That is good. Your heart, if it feels like it's rubbing the wrong way against what we're saying, it's probably because this is the moment when your heart is going to soften.
mhm. And for families who have been in the process and have been waiting for a long time, you may be sitting there thinking, you know what? I- It doesn't matter. No isn't even in our vocabulary when it comes to this.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for the one to choose us. We understand that too.
Hmm.
And again, I think families who have been kind of in the process, these are some of the lessons you learn in that process. And for newer families, it can be a little bit of a surprise, but definitely, one of the things that is important is guarding the hearts of those expectant moms because what we don't want is we don't want that rejection to turn into um, a signal that she's not good enough. Her baby's not good enough. That's not what we want. And really that's a good segue into the next question, which is can an expectant mother say no? Can she change her mind? And that answer is absolutely. They can say no to a family, to a number of things, and they can change their minds.
It's voluntary relinquishment if you're in the world of private adoption. She
Hmm.
can choose to parent. Her circumstances may change. Her frame of mind and her support network may change. She may be connected with some local community resources, so now she feels like being a mom is doable,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And those are all good things that we celebrate.
Yes.
So, absolutely, for whatever reason, if she is in a conversation about private adoption, which is a voluntary relinquishment having nothing to do with child welfare or the foster system, right?
Hmm.
She does have that ability to say, no, I don't want
Hmm.
to do this. I want to parent, close my file. And
Hmm.
she can also, change some of her adoption plan within the yes to adoption. She can say, I want to make an adjustment to my hospital plan.
Hmm.
A hospital plan is something that I know Heather at Lifetime Adoption, which is the agency that we work at, we help birth moms create a hospital plan.
Right. Right.
And that's subject to change, you know. And
Definitely.
she can decide, hey, at first maybe she was hesitant about having contact after the adoption. Maybe now she wants it, or the other way around. That can change as well. Um, but yeah, until her legal consent is complete, she can change her mind about the adoption.
Right. And it's good to know as we're talking about these things that every state has different laws. Some states allow her to sign those consents shortly after birth. Some have waiting periods. Um, most have some type of revocation period after signing that she can change her mind. So when families ask, can she change her mind? The answer is typically yes, with a caveat of how much time she has to do that.
Right. So she definitely can't commit to the adoption until the baby is at least
Hmm.
born. No
Hmm.
states allow her to terminate parental rights to a child that hasn't even been born yet. I
Right.
think we can all agree that's a good thing.
Hmm.
And every state has a timeline. We have a whole Let's Talk Adoption podcast all about timelines.
Yes.
So we dive deep into that conversation. So I recommend that as a next episode. It's all about timelines. Um, and while choosing um, to parent is hard for adoptive parents. If the birth mom that they had their heart set on because she chose them, and they were envisioning the future with this timeline and this birth mom and this state where she lives and this story, right? This narrative of how their child comes to them, even though maybe they have or haven't had that child in their arms yet, it's still heartbreaking.
Hmm.
And I think that birth moms, they don't miss the memo on that.
Right.
A birth mom, a woman who has chosen adoption out of a deep love and concern for her child's future, your heartbreak when she chooses to parent is not lost on her. She
Right.
is so empathetic, and that's really hard. And that doesn't mean she's going to have the perfect way of going about it. Sometimes it's so hard that they can't even return a phone call.
Hmm. I've worked with many moms over the years who've changed their mind, and it's a big decision. And I do think that the gravity of the decision, her decision, is not lost on most families. But but I also want to add a little more in here. I've also worked with moms over the years who, one comes to mind, and she got together with the family that she had chosen. They'd been talking on the phone, and they got together. They kind of met up, and they met up at a mall. And this couple had, I don't know, 5 or 6 year old daughter, and they were spending time together. And the daughter got a little misbehaving, and the adoptive mom, I don't know what was said or done, but I do know the next day the expectant mom called in and said, I'd like to choose a different family. I didn't like seeing how she parented her daughter. And oh, yikes.
Mm.
Let me tell you, that was a very difficult call to make.
Yeah.
Um, but you know what? She is within her rights to do so.
Hmm.
Um,
That family went on to successfully adopt,
they did.
but it just was not a good connection with that for that birth mom.
It was a
It was a
tough,
disconnect.
it was.
Yeah.
And it was it's just good to know. If you're in adoption, whether you're waiting or considering it, those no's can go both ways. Um, both before and after she has the baby. And, usually if she is changing her mind after, it's because those big emotions or her circumstance has changed. And and probably the best advice I could give is is just to stay flexible in those times.
Hmm. And also, I can imagine it's like, well, Now it feels like I'm going to be walking on eggshells.
Right.
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 And the reality is, you are who you are, and she is who she is. And whatever it was, perhaps in the tone of voice in that scenario of that
Mhm.
mom that was trying to corral her
Right.
misbehaving child in public with so
Mm.
much on the line, probably a very stressful moment,
Mhm.
right? Maybe a stressful morning for all of them.
Right.
Emotions were high, stakes were high. Stakes were super high in that moment. Um, that's just what popped out, and that's what we don't know the birth mom, what her experience has been over the course of her life, and hearing a tone like that.
Yep.
And there's nothing you can do about that. We're
Yep.
not all the right fit for everyone, and it's not personal.
No.
Again, that family went on to successfully adopt. In
Mhm.
fact, the child that they were parenting was also through adoption.
Yes.
So they have had more than one birth mom choose them
Yeah.
and successfully place with them. So,
Right.
you know, could they have done better or differently? I don't think so. They just had to be
No.
themselves. And for that birth mom, it wasn't it. And she had the opportunity to choose another family, and they had an opportunity to successfully adopt and complete their family that way.
Right.
And so, it's not necessarily personal. There are definitely things that your adoption professional should train you on, some boundaries and topics to kind of stick to or stay away from. I would say don't venture into the hot seat questions and start asking anything clinical.
No.
Don't ask about
No.
substances, don't ask about birth father, and don't ask about her medical history, and don't ask about her money. And those, I'm not saying those questions shouldn't be asked. So context here. Nobody edit this and just say that, hey, Kim King on Let's Talk Adoption said that. But leave it to the adoption professional to dig into
Right.
those areas and report back to you. And you just be yourself and just allow the Holy Spirit to foster that connection between you and a birth mom that's meant to be a match with you.
And I would say, no one's asking you to be someone you're not.
Yeah.
Just be the best version you have that day.
Hmm.
And I think I th- you know these these stories that we're sharing, these are rare. These are not common
Gosh,
stories.
it sounds, we're so negative, but
I
the
know.
whole podcast is negative today, Heather. I mean, can you say no? It's like the whole thing was negative from the start. We weren't going to win.
So let's go to the next one.
Okay.
Um, can an agency say no?
Uh,
An adoption agency or an adoption, I mean any adoption professional. Can they say no?
in my eyes, they can and they should.
You
No
bet.
agency is the best fit for everyone. That's impossible.
And not everyone is suitable to adopt. And I don't say that from a place of judgment. I say that from a
Mm,
place of legality. Um, every state, just like every state has different adoption laws, every state has guidelines of what constitutes a family who is suitable to adopt. And and I will tell you, not everyone fits that. Most people do. But, there are times, that I know, Kim, you've had to speak with, and I've had to speak with people who, you know, had something in their past that has rendered them ineligible for adoption. And it's heartbreaking, but it it's just part of the laws and governance of adoption.
right. And what we're talking about are serious things such as a child-related crime and the
Mhm.
like. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, just having, you know, a home you live in that you rent is not what we're talking about
No.
instead of owning. We're not talking about you had, some parking tickets.
Mhm.
We're not talking
No.
about you've been married before.
Right.
But
Right.
you can always ask your adoption professional ahead of time that you are considering and be honest about
Mhm.
anything that's on your mind that you feel could be a potential roadblock. Answer
Right.
their questions honestly. Most adoption professionals are going to have some paperwork or a form, something online for you to fill out that's sort of like a little bit of a pre-screening
Mhm.
measure. right? To
And that's what
identify,
they're
is there a red flag we should dig
right.
into more?
And and I think the biggest thing here is honesty.
Mm.
Being honest, because I will say the families who struggle the most in this area are the families who weren't forthcoming in the first place.
Hmm.
Um, Again, another story is a family we worked with that they weren't honest. Um, One of the questions we always ask is, have you ever been arrested, accused, or convicted of a crime? And they answered no. And once they started the home study process, suddenly the background check didn't match that answer of no. There were some very serious charges that unfortunately the wife hadn't even disclosed to the husband.
Yeah,
And so it was layers of challenges this poor woman had.
yeah.
And,
And she had built a new life for herself.
she absolutely had.
She was a new creation, right? And
Hmm.
that was her past.
Hmm.
But in not answering those questions honestly, which she'd gotten herself into a pickle because her husband didn't even know about her past.
Right.
That was a pickle. Yeah.
And so sometimes agencies say no out of caring enough to be honest with you. That there are things that, some things like that, that family, they were never able to adopt. What she had on her record was pretty serious. Um, there are other things that an agency may say no or not right now. Maybe for a family who isn't emotionally ready. Maybe they've had a very recent loss of a child. Maybe they're not financially prepared. Maybe they have unrealistic expectations. A good agency will say no. And again, sometimes that no is no, we're not a good fit. Sometimes that no is no, you need to take some time here. Let us help encourage you in where you need to be. And sometimes no is that it's you have things that you need to look into before adoption. One that I see unfortunately more than I wish I did now is families who are coming to adoption after going through cancer. And that's that for some people, we see all kinds, but breast cancer is one of the common ones. And for women, that is often something that, you don't get diagnosed and all fixed up in 3 months. It's 9 months, a year, 18 months just to get through what you need to do. And sometimes women are fresh off that and then want to jump into adoption. And that requires a conversation. That's not a no, but there are things that are required by a home study when you've had a very serious diagnosis. And I'm not saying if you've had cancer, don't pursue adoption. Absolutely. Pursue it. Just know that um, with any with any major life challenge, uh, your adoption professional may, give you some guidance on, okay, this is how our time frame needs to look because of that. Or these are the things, financial preparation. You may need to spend some time doing, getting your financial house in order. Whether it's, paying off debt, raising some funds, getting your things, squared away for that journey. It may be your physical surroundings. Maybe your home needs, you need to add a room on or move to a bigger place. An agency may say no in order to help you get to where you need to be to pursue adoption. And again, that is a good thing.
Hmm. And don't disqualify yourself. Don't hear the things that we're saying could cause a delay or cause a
Hmm.
no from an agency. Don't hear those and self-assess and say, oh, well, I guess we'll never adopt. Reach
Hmm.
out, reach out to two or three agencies and compare
Definitely.
notes on their answers to these questions. Sometimes agencies have certain policies that are based on state requirements, but sometimes
Hmm.
they layer their own on top of that.
Right.
So a state might say, well, you have to have 6 months after a loss. An agency might say you have to have a year after a loss and have completed a certain amount of therapy or counseling. So it's good to ask these questions and compare notes on a few different agencies if the answer that you were given isn't satisfying, doesn't satisfy your desire to move forward soon. Another reason why an agency may decide, I guess, a soft no is they're sensing a lack of partnership with the adoptive family
Mm-hmm.
because everything along the way to successfully adopting and receiving a child who becomes your own from someone else that you're meeting through the agency, it's a big ask. It's ask after ask after ask that adoptive parents are having to follow through, stay focused, prioritize, follow the steps. There are tangible steps that need to be taken in order to even be legally able
Right.
to be considered by a birth mom or to adopt, to take
Hmm.
placement of a child.
Hmm.
So if an agency early on is sensing a lack of communication, a lack of being on the same page, a lack of partnership, a lack of ability to follow the basic steps, they may be concerned about that long-term partnership that sometimes their frame of mind can be, things aren't even happening yet. How are they going to be when things actually get stressful?
Right.
Right? And that could be a reason. So, police yourself and be honest with yourself. And I think it's good that we're having this conversation now so you can be prepared for some of these things and decide what
Right.
what your personality is going to be with your agency. Am I going
Right.
to be someone that for once in my life I do everything that I'm told? Am I for once in
That's
my
right.
life going to meet deadlines? Because if there's only once in your life, let this be it. Let adoption be it.
Well, there's another side of no's from adoption agencies or adoption professionals also, and that is saying no to potential birth parents that may call them.
Mm.
That's something that honestly that we don't talk about or even think about that much because I think the understanding is that sure agencies will work with anybody, help them make an adoption plan, and by and large, we will help anyone, but we won't help anyone. There are, agencies on that whole birth parent side. They have procedures in place, things that they require. Um,
Things they require of birth parents.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So just because a woman is pregnant and contacts an agency doesn't mean they're automatically agreeing to assist her
you bet.
or that it doesn't require anything else of her from there.
Right. No, it does require things of her.
Hmm.
Also, there are calls that they get that are outside of their scope. A good example of that is, I know you've gotten these calls too, Kim. Someone who's at their wits' end with their 10-year-old and wants to place them. It's like, yeah, no, this number one, they're usually not serious. Number two, it's heartbreaking when they're making this call in front of the 10-year-old. That's
Hmm.
awful. And number three, I'm not going to be a part of this. This is, first off, this is trauma inducing to that child. And it just is, it's not, we're not even going to go down that road with you. There are women who call in who are not who they say they are. There are situations that are very high risk. You know, if we have a mom who absolutely is 100% on adoption and the dad is 100% against it, an adoption's not going to happen. We're not going to, sure, she could she could do everything and pick a family and sign all the papers, and this will end up in court in a contested adoption, and the father will win.
Hmm.
A good agency doesn't try to create contested adoptions. A good agency understands that, both parents have rights, like it or not. Both parents have rights, and they need to be honored and respected, and the
Hmm.
law needs to be followed.
Right.
And and so I think it's good to know that, a good adoption professional isn't just trying to make matches happen. They're trying to provide services and protect everyone involved.
Hmm.
And
Including
really,
birth fathers.
yeah,
We don't
yeah,
talk enough about birth fathers usually because they're not a big dialogue character in the scene of
yeah,
adoption
yeah.
usually, right?
It's
But they
it's
totally can be.
they can be, but it's
Yeah.
almost kind of optional,
Yeah.
by their choice.
Right. I think that's also a sign of a good agency that they make an effort with birth father. Try to get
Absolutely.
his
Yeah.
contact information. Reach out to him, invite him to the
Hmm.
conversation. Let him know his options too.
Right.
And being a part of choosing a family, being a part of getting to know them, being a part of shaping how things go at placement, and being a part of what open adoption could look like. Which brings
Brings
us
us
to
to
the
our
next
last one.
one, the
Yeah.
last one.
Can you say no to open adoption? And really, we're talking about a family here. A
Mm,
birth mother, birth father, they can say yes or
they can,
no.
yeah.
Absolutely. It's totally with them. Can adoptive parents say no to open adoption? And this is a really interesting one. The answer is yes. A family can say no to open adoption prior to adopting.
Right. But realistically, it's going to limit their opportunities significantly because most women today, when it comes to private adoption and choosing adoption for her baby, they do want some level of openness.
Mhm. And that doesn't mean that they're, coming over on weekends and Tuesday nights. It's not like that. It's not
Mm.
constant visits, but it might mean texts, it might mean pictures, updates, getting together for a visit a couple times a year, um, a relationship that grows and evolves over time.
Hmm. And, this is definitely where families need to be honest on multiple levels. Honest with themselves
Hmm.
about what they feel they can follow through with so that they don't make promises that they really aren't designed to keep by nature. And that really breaks the heart of a birth mom, breaks a lot of trust, and can cause a lot of challenges in the relationship with the child as the child gets older and has questions and has those conversations
Hmm.
with the adoptive parents and possibly birth mom if they reconnect with her over the years. But being honest with yourself as adoptive parents, what are my concerns about open adoption, if any? Because when you can be honest about what's bugging you, what's not holding water, what's not reconciling for you, write those down and bring it to an adoption professional who hopefully has experience in helping families learn about open adoption and has maybe at least a few years, if not decades, of experience seeing open adoptions go smoothly and successfully for everyone. Bring those concerns to the table.
Hmm.
Let them help you unpack that. So then, instead of based on fear, assumption, bias, lack of information, um, stereotypes, you can actually decide based on fact.
Hmm.
And if you decide open adoption is not for you, then you've made an informed decision. And absolutely you can say no to that, but definitely before the birth, you know. Hopefully
Yeah.
hopefully you'll let your adoption professional know up front based on the information that, closed adoption is what you prefer and these are your reasons and nope, none of the things you've shared with us are going to make us decide anything else. That's that. Let the adoption professional know that because they might be very limited in helping you. And
Hmm.
again, that could be a reason that they're not a fit to help you and have to say no to your application with them.
Right.
But that also helps you free up to find the agency or path that could be successful, such as international adoption.
Definitely. And Kim, I think the thing we both hear the most in this is I don't want to share my child.
Mm.
And if you haven't talked to an adoption professional and that resonates with you, I would really encourage you to because um, it's not co-parenting. And that's the biggest thing I think families come into open adoption thinking it is some level or it feels like co-parenting, and it really isn't. If mom wants to parent, she can parent. She
Hmm.
doesn't need to co-parent with you. She can do it on her own. She can parent. But learn if that resonates, like I say, just learn because it can be so rich and so rewarding. But again, and you touched on it, Kim, where families can't say no is after the adoption. Certainly, if there's concerns about safety, involve your adoption professional, but you can't agree to an open adoption and then change the terms. Um, you were chosen because you were represented normally as someone who's ready and excited for an open adoption. And you cannot, and you should never promise openness to be chosen and then say no later.
Hmm. There are some episodes that we've done on open adoption. If you are thinking, actually, I'm in that group of people that's hesitant and fearful,
Hmm.
so how can I get to that place where what Heather is describing could be true for me, where I'm like, I'm making a commitment I plan to follow through with, and I see this more as a covenant with birth mom.
Hmm.
If you're a Christian, you understand what I'm saying here. It's a
Hmm.
covenant.
Hmm.
But there's an episode called What Research Really Says About Open Adoption. I think that's a good place to start.
Definitely.
That is a past Let's Talk Adoption podcast episode, What Research Really Says About Open Adoption. It was back in September. So, peruse the podcasts episodes. I said webinar because we also do webinars. We're just constantly talking, Heather. But there are some really good ones, like some ones that are about the aha moments and the stereotypes. And I think just having an open heart and mind is going to be, you know, the best service that we can provide you all this information, but if your hearts and minds aren't open, it has nowhere to land, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
So, I hope you've learned today that certainly no is allowed in open adoption, and not every no is bad. Um, but no can be healthy. And, some no's actually protect people.
Hmm. Right.
And I think some protect maybe bad matches or matches that wouldn't have been successful.
Hmm.
And some even create space for the right yes when it's time.
Hmm. And, I hope that we've also shared with you that families have said no because it's just not convenient. Well, adoption is not about convenience. This path you're on, there's nothing convenient
No,
about it. You're,
no.
you know, going to be having a baby. Talk about, some moments where you're going to be inconvenienced. All good reasons, but it's not about convenience. It's not about perfection either, you know. And it's not about waiting for the easiest path that allows you to stay in your bubble, and it's the picture perfect adoption, almost like you gave birth to the child yourself.
Right.
That birth mom made every decision you would have made. You know, it's not about that.
It it's not. And really what adoption is about making ethical, educated, loving, thoughtful decisions. And always remembering that these are real people. We put titles on them, expectant mothers, adoptive parents, and we need to remember that they aren't labels. They are real people.
Hmm. And we hope that this episode of Let's Talk Adoption gave you some insight into how decisions really work in adoption, how to frame those decisions you'll be making. And we hope that this has been empowering for you.
Right. And maybe it even helped clarify that, you know, while yes, there are choices in adoption, those choices carry weight. And, strive to be the people that, can give an enthusiastic and authentic yes. I think that is one takeaway I would really share.
And that's what this is all about. This is about supporting a woman on her path to where she's at peace with saying yes, truly through and through, and that you as adoptive parents are also prepared to say yes without hesitation. So thank you for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Adoption. Be sure to subscribe, and you can always write to us through our website at letstalkadoption.com. You can share your feedback, criticisms, questions, ideas, suggestions, whatever's on your mind. Write us a note through letstalkadoption.com, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next one.